All truth passes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident. People who ridicule the truth also ridicule great ideas as well. And this is what makes them idiots. History shows us that some of the greatest ideas were first laughed at, mocked, and dismissed by ordinary minds. The crowd often mistakes originality for foolishness because it cannot recognize what is ahead of its time. Schopenhauer understood this better than many other philosophers. He knew that independent thinkers rarely receive immediate acceptance. But why do people oppose great ideas? Why are original thinkers so often rejected? And how can you prevent ignorant people from talking you out of something that could change your life? One of the deepest reasons great minds face resistance is that independent thought itself breeds resentment. According to Schopenhauer, most people do not truly think for themselves. Their opinions are borrowed from society, tradition, authority, or popular consensus. As he wrote, "The rest of men are all mediatized, as is already seen from their style, which has no stamp of originality." Original thinking is rare, and because it is rare, it is often met with suspicion. The herd, the mass of conventional opinion, naturally distrust anyone who dares to think independently. Schopenhauer writes, "Every genuine and original thinker is to this extent like a monarch. He is immediate and perceives no one who is his superior." A truly original mind does not seek permission from the crowd. It does not ask what everyone else believes before forming its own judgment. Like a monarch, it stands on its own authority. Its ideas emerge not from popularity, but from conviction. The herd, however, operates differently. It depends on collective agreement. It prefers tradition over discovery, authority over understanding, and consensus over insight. Most people feel safer believing what everyone else believes. As a result, when someone breaks free from these mental chains, the reaction is often hostility, ridicule, or anger. Schopenhauer noticed that many people would rather quote authorities than think for themselves. Instead of building an argument through reason, they hide behind famous names and accepted opinions. He compares such people to horny Siegfrieds immersed in the flood of an inability to think and judge. They wield quotations and authorities like weapons, hoping borrowed wisdom will compensate for their lack of independent judgment. When a great thinker relies on reason rather than reputation, he threatens this entire way of thinking. Schopenhauer writes, "Those who are so eager and hasty to decide debatable questions by quoting authorities will hold up to him their authorities as an argumentum ad verecundium and will cry Victoria." In other words, fools often declare victory the moment they can point to a respected authority. They are not interested in whether an argument is true. They are interested in whether it has been approved by someone famous. But the original thinker refuses to play this game. He trusts what he has seen and understood for himself. He does not bow automatically before accepted opinions. And this independence often infuriates those who depend on authority for their beliefs. Their ridicule often reveals more about their insecurity than about the quality of your vision. That is why Schopenhauer writes, "On similar occasions, ordinary minds, thoughts run on the same lines. And this explains why certain fundamental views obtain amongst mankind at all times, while the great minds of all ages are in open or secret opposition to them." In On Reputation, Schopenhauer describes what seems almost like a secret alliance of average minds against anyone who stands out. He writes, "In his own sphere of work, no one will allow another to be distinguished. He is an intruder who cannot be tolerated. Si quelqu'un excelle parmi nous, qu'il aille exceller ailleurs." This is the universal password of the second rate. The meaning is simple. If someone dares to excel, the mediocre respond, "Go excel somewhere else." They do not want greatness among them, because greatness exposes the limits of their own abilities. Instead of celebrating originality, they feel threatened by it. Instead of applauding achievement, they try to diminish it. Schopenhauer leaves little doubt about the source of this hostility. He explains that envy is the moving spirit of that secret and informal alliance everywhere made by mediocrity against individual eminence. Every person of modest ability fears being overshadowed. When someone nearby begins to shine, the instinct is often not to improve oneself, but to pull the other person back down. This is why ridicule is so often directed at new ideas. A person who says, "Your idea is foolish," may not be responding to the idea at all. He may simply be reacting to the uncomfortable possibility that someone else sees further than he does. Schopenhauer understood that it is much easier to deny greatness than to develop it. It is easier to mock excellence than to achieve excellence. He reminds us that the majority of men are not capable of thinking, but only of believing, and are not accessible to reason, but only to authority. Such people do not evaluate ideas through independent judgment. Instead, they follow what is familiar, accepted, and approved by others. As a result, many refuse to recognize greatness when it appears before them. Schopenhauer writes, "No one is taken for what he is, but for what others make of him." And this is the handle used by mediocrity to keep down distinction. In other words, people are often judged not by their actual worth, but by their reputation. If mediocrity can prevent a great thinker from gaining recognition, then it can pretend that thinker does not matter. By celebrating mediocrity, envy attempts to bury excellence beneath noise and confusion. At other times, the attack becomes even more subtle. Instead of criticizing greatness, people simply refuse to acknowledge it. Schopenhauer warns of the malicious silence, known as ignoring. This may be the most frustrating form of opposition, because it leaves no obvious enemy to confront. When a genuinely original thinker appears, their tongues are all paralyzed. Their silence is so unanimous that it savors of preconcertion. Schopenhauer writes, "Great minds are lighthouses of humanity, and without them, mankind would lose itself in the boundless sea of monstrous error and bewilderment." The image is beautiful. Great thinkers illuminate paths that others cannot yet see. They guide humanity forward. The world may resist them, mock them, or ignore them, but eventually their light becomes impossible to deny. This is why you should be cautious when listening to those who dismiss your ideas. Sometimes criticism is useful, sometimes it helps us improve, but sometimes the criticism comes from envy, insecurity, or resentment. Sometimes the person trying to discourage you simply lacks the vision to understand what you are attempting to create. Schopenhauer admired those who continued their work despite such resistance. Through the example of Goethe, he suggests that we should meet the storm of the world by continuing our intellectual labor undisturbed. The proper response to envy is not bitterness, it is perseverance. Conquasada sed ferax, shaken but fruitful. Schopenhauer once wrote, "Ordinary minds, notwithstanding individual variation, have a certain tendency to think alike. This does not necessarily mean they have discovered the truth. Rather, it means they tend to cling to the same assumptions and inherited opinions." He points out the remarkable fact that certain fundamental views obtain among mankind at all times and are always being repeated, while the great minds of all ages are in open or secret opposition to them. Schopenhauer understood this reality well. That is why he wrote that the best thing for a genius is to spend his life in enjoying the pleasure of his own thoughts. A great thinker cannot depend on immediate approval from the world, because the world is often unable to recognize the value of a new idea when it first appears. Schopenhauer suggests that the message of a genius is often so far beyond ordinary understanding that to some extent is a revelation, and he himself a higher being. Yet before that revelation is accepted, it appears threatening. As a result, when ordinary people encounter something genuinely new, their first reaction is often rejection rather than investigation. The unfamiliar feels dangerous simply because it is unfamiliar. This resistance becomes even stronger when ignorance enters the picture. Schopenhauer notes that geniuses can be long time without being recognized or appreciated, stupidity preventing the one and envy the other. The ordinary mind often chooses comfort over understanding, because understanding requires effort, uncertainty, and change, and one other thing, loneliness. Not the loneliness of having no people around you, but the loneliness of seeing things that others cannot see, valuing things that others do not value, and dedicating yourself to purposes that most people will never understand. Schopenhauer believed that the genius lives a kind of double life. Like everyone else, he participates in the ordinary world of daily concerns, obligations, and personal affairs. But beyond this common existence, he possesses something else. As Schopenhauer writes, he has a second life, purely of the intellect. This intellectual life exists on a different plane. It is concerned not with reputation, gossip, status, or social approval, but with ideas, truth, beauty, and understanding. Yet this gift comes at a cost. The more deeply someone is devoted to thought, the more isolated he often becomes. To the unthinking observer, such a person may seem distant, eccentric, or even mad. People cannot understand why he spends hours alone, why he is preoccupied with ideas, or why he appears indifferent to the things that excite everyone else. This misunderstanding often turns into resistance. Schopenhauer points to the example of Goethe. During periods of war and political turmoil, Goethe continued pursuing his intellectual work. Schopenhauer notes that Goethe, during the war, amid all bustle, took up his work as soon as the storm of the world allowed. While others were consumed by events of the moment, Goethe remained devoted to something greater and more enduring. Many people around him could not understand this dedication. To them, he may have appeared detached from reality. They saw only an odd man occupied with strange pursuits. What they failed to recognize was that Goethe was pursuing ends higher than his personal existence. This is one of the tragedies of genius. The very qualities that make a person's work valuable are often the same qualities that make him difficult for others to understand. Schopenhauer argues that those who create truly important things must often think beyond their own time. If someone works primarily for future generations, he must accept the possibility of being quite unknown to their contemporaries. The reward may come decades or even centuries later. Most people find this impossible to comprehend. They want immediate recognition, immediate approval, and immediate results. Consequently, they often resent anyone who seems indifferent to these things. Schopenhauer also identifies another challenge faced by creative minds: distraction. A profound idea requires concentration. Deep thinking cannot flourish amid constant interruption. Schopenhauer compares the mind of genius to something precious and delicate, capable of extraordinary achievements when left undisturbed, but easily disrupted when continually fragmented. In his essay on noise, he expresses this frustration with remarkable intensity. He writes that are not sensitive to noise, but they are just the very people who are also not sensitive to argument or thought, or poetry, or art, in a word, to any kind of intellectual influence. Those who constantly create noise often cannot understand why it matters. To them, interruption is insignificant. They assume everyone can simply continue where they left off. But Schopenhauer knew otherwise. For a deeply engaged thinker, a sudden interruption can destroy an entire chain of thought. He complains that a single disturbance puts an end to all quiet thought, and that every such interruption rends the thread of reflection and murders thought.